Have you ever felt the sting of someone's words or the coldness of someone you care about turning away? The kind of hurt that lingers, eats at your peace, and keeps replaying in your mind? It's exhausting, and sometimes it feels impossible to know what to do next. Today, we're going to dive deep into a truth that many people avoid talking about: handling a woman who hurts you without losing yourself, without bitterness, and with 100% effectiveness. Why should you watch this completely? Because what I'm about to share isn't just about surviving the pain, it's about transforming it into clarity, confidence, and emotional strength. By the end, you will know exactly how to respond, protect your energy, and maintain your dignity. This isn't about revenge, it's about mastery, emotional mastery. When someone you care about hurts you, the first instinct is almost always to react immediately. The mind floods with thoughts of anger, betrayal, and frustration, and the heart feels heavy with disappointment. It is normal to feel this way, yet acting purely from that place of raw emotion rarely leads to resolution. One of the most important steps in handling a woman who hurts you is to pause and take a moment to understand her perspective before you respond. Understanding does not mean excusing the behavior or allowing yourself to be mistreated. It simply means stepping outside the immediacy of your hurt to see the situation more clearly, which is a skill that transforms emotional pain into thoughtful action. When you try to understand her perspective, you are essentially giving yourself the gift of clarity, a clarity that allows you to navigate the situation with intelligence rather than impulse. People often hurt others not out of cruelty, but because of their own unresolved struggles, insecurities, or emotional wounds. Her actions may be influenced by fear, stress, past experiences, or pressures that she has not shared openly. By trying to understand these underlying causes, you can see that the hurt you are feeling is not always a reflection of your value or worth, but rather a reflection of her internal state. Taking a step back to observe the behavior without judgment is the first step toward understanding. It is easy to misinterpret her actions when you are hurt. The mind tends to exaggerate and fill gaps with assumptions that may not even be true. Thoughts like, "She is doing this to deliberately hurt me," or "She doesn't care about me at all," often spiral into a narrative that intensifies your suffering. When you pause and consider her possible perspective, you begin to detach from these assumptions and replace them with thoughtful observation. This detachment is crucial because it prevents impulsive reactions that could escalate the situation. Observing her actions, her tone, her words, and even the context in which they occur allows you to gain insight into her emotional state. A cold or distant behavior may not be about you personally, but could be about something completely unrelated, such as stress at work, personal anxiety, or fear of vulnerability. Understanding this perspective gives you power, because power comes not from control over others, but from control over your own reactions. Moreover, understanding her perspective allows you to respond with empathy rather than resentment. Empathy does not weaken you, it strengthens your emotional resilience. By imagining what she might be feeling, you cultivate patience and reduce the intensity of negative emotions that cloud judgment. This approach also helps you communicate more effectively. When you have insight into the reasons behind her actions, you can choose words that are precise, calm, and non-confrontational, making it more likely that a productive conversation can occur. Without understanding, communication often becomes a battlefield of accusations and defensiveness, leaving both parties more hurt than before. Finally, when you approach the situation with the intention of understanding, you transform yourself from a reactive participant into a deliberate actor in the dynamic. Instead of being trapped in cycles of emotional pain, you begin to recognize patterns, triggers, and behaviors without judgment. You can anticipate challenges and decide consciously how to engage rather than being swept away by raw emotions. This mindset shift is transformative because it allows you to protect your emotional well-being while maintaining a sense of compassion. It is the difference between being controlled by pain and mastering your responses to it, and it creates a foundation for all further steps in handling hurt constructively. One of the most important aspects of handling a woman who hurts you is learning to set firm boundaries, because boundaries are the foundation of emotional safety and self-respect. Without them, it is easy to become entangled in cycles of hurt, confusion, and resentment. Many people struggle with boundaries because they fear confrontation or worry that asserting their limits will be perceived as selfish or uncaring. The truth is, boundaries are not about pushing someone away or punishing them. They are about protecting your own mental and emotional well-being while communicating clearly what is acceptable and what is not. Establishing boundaries starts with a deep understanding of yourself, your values, your needs, your limits, and the behaviors you are unwilling to tolerate. When you are clear about these aspects of yourself, you can approach interactions from a position of strength rather than defensiveness, which shifts the dynamic entirely. Setting boundaries is not only about defining what others should or should not do, but also about clarifying how you respond when those boundaries are crossed. For example, if a woman consistently dismisses your feelings or speaks to you in a hurtful way, it is crucial to communicate calmly but firmly that such behavior is not acceptable. This might look like saying, "I need to be spoken to with respect," or "I cannot engage in conversation when it becomes hurtful." By articulating your boundaries clearly, you remove ambiguity from the relationship and prevent misunderstandings that often exacerbate emotional pain. Boundaries act as a protective barrier, ensuring that your emotional energy is not depleted by repeated negative interactions, and they create a framework in which mutual respect can flourish. It is equally important to understand that boundaries are about consistency and follow-through. Simply stating a limit without enforcing it teaches others that your words are negotiable, which undermines your credibility and emotional authority. When you set a boundary, you must be prepared to uphold it, whether that means stepping away from a conversation, taking time for yourself, or in extreme cases, disengaging from a toxic relationship. Enforcing boundaries does not make you cruel or unkind. It makes you strong and self-aware. People who respect themselves and their limits naturally inspire respect from others, and those who are unwilling to respect your boundaries reveal the nature of the relationship, allowing you to make informed decisions about how much emotional investment is safe. Setting firm boundaries also transforms the way you experience hurt. Without boundaries, you are vulnerable to repeated emotional wounds because there is no clear line between acceptable and unacceptable behavior. With boundaries, however, you create a mental and emotional space where you can respond thoughtfully instead of reacting impulsively. Boundaries act as a buffer against manipulation, guilt tripping, or emotional outbursts, allowing you to engage only on terms that preserve your dignity. This practice does not come naturally to everyone, and it requires courage, self-awareness, and repetition. It is normal to feel uncomfortable at first, especially if you have a history of prioritizing others' feelings over your own, but the discomfort diminishes as you experience the empowerment that comes from protecting your own emotional well-being. Furthermore, boundaries are not static. They evolve as you grow and as the dynamics of the relationship change. What you tolerate today may be different from what you tolerate tomorrow, and adjusting boundaries is a sign of self-respect, not weakness. Boundaries are a statement that your emotions matter, that your peace matters, and that your self-worth cannot be compromised. They create a framework in which relationships can exist healthily, or in some cases allow you to step away from those that remain harmful despite your efforts. By establishing and maintaining firm boundaries, you signal that your emotional health is a priority, and in doing so, you cultivate resilience, clarity, and a stronger sense of self. When someone you care about hurts you, your emotions can feel overwhelming, like a storm that you cannot control. Anger, sadness, disappointment, and even confusion flood your mind and body, and the instinct is often to push these feelings away, to suppress them in the hope that they will disappear on their own. But suppressing emotions is a trap that only intensifies the pain over time. Unexpressed feelings have a way of resurfacing unexpectedly, often in moments where control is limited, leading to outbursts or passive-aggressive behaviors that hurt both you and the relationship. The key to handling a woman who hurts you is learning to manage your emotions thoughtfully, rather than suppressing them or allowing them to dictate your actions. Emotional management does not mean ignoring how you feel. It means acknowledging the intensity of your feelings, understanding their source, and channeling them in a way that empowers rather than debilitates you. The first step in managing emotions is awareness. It is essential to recognize what you are feeling without judgment. Instead of telling yourself, "I shouldn't feel this way," or "this is too much," you pause and name the emotion: anger, frustration, hurt, sadness, or disappointment. Labeling emotions helps reduce their intensity because it shifts your brain from a reactive state to an analytical state. You begin to see the emotion as a signal rather than a verdict, as a message about your needs and boundaries, rather than a force that controls your behavior. Awareness also allows you to differentiate between emotions that require immediate action and those that need processing over time. Some feelings may demand conversation or boundary setting, while others require reflection, self-care, or temporary distance. After awareness comes acceptance. Accepting your emotions is not the same as giving in to them. It is an acknowledgement that your feelings are valid and human. When you accept your emotions, you stop battling yourself, which reduces internal tension and anxiety. Emotional acceptance also prevents projection, the tendency to blame others for the intensity of your feelings. For example, when hurt arises from someone's words or actions, it is easy to react impulsively and lash out. By accepting that the hurt exists and is part of your natural response, you give yourself the space to respond thoughtfully instead of being swept away by immediate reaction. Once you have acknowledged and accepted your emotions, the next step is healthy expression. This can take many forms: journaling your thoughts, talking to a trusted friend or counselor, practicing mindfulness, or engaging in physical activity to release tension. Expressing your emotions prevents them from accumulating into resentment or passive-aggressive tendencies that can damage your peace and your relationships. Healthy expression also allows you to gain perspective because when emotions are externalized in a constructive way, they become easier to analyze and understand. You can identify triggers, recurring patterns, and the specific ways in which a person's behavior impacts you, which provides invaluable insight for your next steps. Equally important is emotional regulation, the ability to respond in a way that aligns with your values rather than reacting purely from instinct. Techniques such as deep breathing, meditation, or grounding exercises can help manage the intensity of emotions in real time, giving you the mental clarity to choose your responses carefully. When you practice emotional regulation consistently, you begin to realize that your emotions do not control you. They inform you. You gain mastery over your reactions, allowing you to engage in conversations with composure, make decisions without clouded judgment, and maintain dignity even in challenging interactions. Managing emotions without suppressing them also strengthens your inner resilience. Each time you acknowledge, accept, express, and regulate your feelings, you reinforce your ability to handle emotional pain without losing yourself. You cultivate a sense of control and self-confidence, knowing that hurtful actions from others do not have the power to destabilize your inner world. Over time, this practice transforms the way you experience relationships and conflict, allowing you to act with clarity, self-respect, and wisdom. One of the most critical skills in handling a woman who hurts you is the ability to communicate clearly without aggression. When emotions are running high, it is all too easy to let frustration or hurt dictate your words, resulting in statements that are accusatory, harsh, or defensive. These types of responses rarely lead to understanding. Instead, they escalate conflicts and deepen emotional distance. Clear communication, on the other hand, creates a space where honesty and respect coexist, allowing both parties to express their feelings without fear of attack or dismissal. The goal is not to avoid difficult conversations or to suppress your truth, but to express yourself in a way that preserves your dignity, conveys your needs, and opens the possibility for meaningful resolution. The foundation of clear communication begins with self-awareness. Before speaking, take a moment to identify exactly what you want to say and why it matters. This prevents your words from being colored by fleeting emotions and ensures that your message is coherent and focused. When hurt occurs, people often default to vague statements like, "You always hurt me," or "You don't care about me," which are sweeping generalizations that trigger defensiveness. Instead, aim for specificity. Describe the exact behavior or situation that caused pain, how it affected you, and what you need moving forward. For example, saying, "When you raise your voice at me during disagreements, I feel disrespected, and I need us to speak calmly," communicates both the issue and the desired outcome without attacking her character. Specificity grounds your communication in reality and makes it much harder for the other person to dismiss or misinterpret your perspective. Tone and body language are equally important in communication. Even the most well-chosen words can be undermined by a harsh tone, crossed arms, or aggressive gestures. When you speak calmly, maintain open posture, and make steady eye contact, you convey that your intention is not to dominate or fight, but to resolve and clarify. Calmness is contagious. When one person remains composed, it becomes easier for the other to mirror that composure, reducing the likelihood of a heated argument. Additionally, pauses and measured speech allow you to collect your thoughts mid-conversation, preventing impulsive reactions that might escalate tension. Active listening is another essential component of communicating clearly. Communication is a two-way process, and listening demonstrates respect for her perspective while providing valuable insight into the reasons behind her actions. Often, conflicts intensify not because of what is said, but because one or both parties feel unheard. By listening attentively, summarizing what she says, and reflecting it back, you validate her experience without compromising your own boundaries. This creates a dynamic in which both parties can be heard, understood, and respected, transforming what could be a confrontation into a constructive dialogue. Finally, communicating without aggression requires the practice of assertiveness rather than dominance. Assertiveness means expressing your thoughts, feelings, and needs confidently and respectfully without resorting to manipulation, intimidation, or blame. It is a skill that balances empathy with self-respect, allowing you to hold firm to your boundaries while engaging in dialogue. Over time, this approach not only diffuses tension, but also builds trust because people recognize that you are honest, consistent, and composed even in emotionally charged situations. Effective communication without aggression empowers you to navigate hurtful situations with clarity, dignity, and confidence, setting a standard for how interactions should occur and ensuring that your voice is heard without sacrificing your peace. When someone hurts you, it is natural to fixate on their actions, their intentions, and the impact they have had on your life. However, one of the most transformative steps you can take in handling this type of emotional pain is to shift the focus inward, toward your own growth and self-worth. Often, the hurt feels magnified because we tie our value to how others treat us, allowing their words or behaviors to define our sense of self. By consciously redirecting energy toward personal development and self-appreciation, you reclaim control over your emotions, your confidence, and your life trajectory. Growth begins with self-awareness, taking the time to understand your strengths, your weaknesses, and your passions. When you know who you are at your core, external actions cannot destabilize your foundation. Developing this self-knowledge creates a buffer against the pain caused by someone else's behavior, allowing you to respond rather than react and to maintain dignity even in difficult interactions. Investing in your own growth also requires taking actionable steps that nurture your mind, body, and spirit. This might involve learning new skills, exploring creative outlets, engaging in physical fitness, or seeking knowledge that expands your horizons. When your energy is focused on improving yourself, you naturally cultivate resilience and confidence, which reduces the emotional weight of someone else's hurtful actions. Growth is not simply about distraction. It is about building a life that is rich, purposeful, and independent of external validation. By developing your passions, achieving personal goals, and prioritizing self-improvement, you reinforce the belief that your worth is inherent and not contingent on someone else's behavior or approval. Equally important is cultivating self-worth through self-compassion. Many people internalize hurt, believing they are at fault for someone else's actions or that they somehow deserved the pain. Self-compassion challenges this narrative by acknowledging that your feelings are valid, that you are deserving of respect and care, and that mistakes or imperfections do not diminish your value. Practices such as journaling, affirmations, mindfulness, or simply allowing yourself quiet reflection can strengthen this sense of intrinsic worth. When you treat yourself with kindness and understanding, you create an inner environment that shields you from unnecessary emotional harm and nurtures your resilience in the face of challenges. Focusing on your growth and self-worth also changes the way you engage in relationships. When you are confident in your value and secure in your identity, you are less likely to tolerate repeated hurt or manipulation. You recognize when boundaries are being crossed and have the courage to assert your needs. You also begin to attract healthier interactions and people who respect you because the energy you project communicates that you are grounded, self-aware, and unwilling to compromise your peace for temporary comfort. Emotional independence, cultivated through personal growth, ensures that your sense of happiness and fulfillment does not depend on the approval or behavior of others, allowing you to approach difficult situations with clarity and composure. Ultimately, focusing on your own growth and self-worth transforms pain into opportunity. It shifts the narrative from being a passive recipient of hurt to an active architect of your life. By prioritizing your development, nurturing your talents, and reinforcing your intrinsic value, you create a life that is resilient to emotional setbacks and capable of thriving despite external challenges. This focus becomes a powerful anchor, grounding you in confidence, self-respect, and personal strength, and ensuring that your energy is spent on progress, not on lingering in negativity. One of the most difficult yet essential skills in handling a woman who hurts you is knowing when to walk away without regret. Walking away is often misunderstood as a sign of weakness, failure, or giving up, but in reality, it is an act of strength, self-respect, and clarity. Sometimes, despite your best efforts to communicate, set boundaries, and manage emotions, the dynamic remains toxic or damaging. In these cases, continuing to engage only prolongs the pain, drains your energy, and diminishes your emotional well-being. Understanding when to step back is a recognition that not all battles need to be fought, not all conflicts need resolution, and not every relationship is meant to survive every challenge. Walking away does not mean that you stop caring. It means that you care enough about yourself to prioritize your mental health and peace of mind over continued hurt. The decision to walk away begins with awareness and honest evaluation. You must be willing to assess the impact of the relationship on your life objectively without being clouded by hope, fear, or attachment. Reflect on patterns of behavior. Has the hurt become repetitive? Are your boundaries being consistently crossed despite clear communication? Does engagement leave you feeling diminished rather than empowered? These questions are not easy to ask, and the answers may be uncomfortable, but facing them is crucial. Clarity comes from observing facts rather than clinging to expectations or desires. Once you recognize that a situation is consistently harmful, walking away becomes a conscious choice rooted in wisdom rather than impulse. Walking away also requires the courage to embrace uncertainty. It is natural to fear loneliness, regret, or social judgment when ending a challenging connection. Many people remain in toxic situations because leaving feels like a loss, even when staying is more damaging. The key is to shift perspective. Leaving is not loss, but liberation. By stepping away, you reclaim control over your life, your energy, and your emotional narrative. You signal to yourself that your peace is non-negotiable and that you refuse to sacrifice your well-being for the sake of attachment or obligation. This act of self-preservation is empowering because it prioritizes your long-term growth and happiness over short-term discomfort or fear. Moreover, walking away without regret requires releasing the need for validation from the other person. It is common to question whether the other person will understand, appreciate, or acknowledge your decision. However, your choice does not need external approval to be valid. When you walk away, you are asserting that your life, boundaries, and emotions matter independently of how someone else perceives them. This mindset fosters resilience and prevents lingering self-doubt, allowing you to move forward with confidence rather than looking back with hesitation. Choosing to walk away also opens space for new opportunities, healthier connections, and personal growth. It allows you to redirect your energy toward relationships and environments that nurture you rather than deplete you. By leaving situations that consistently cause pain, you create the freedom to invest in yourself, explore your passions, and cultivate the kind of life that aligns with your values. Walking away is not an act of abandonment. It is an intentional, courageous step toward protecting your emotional health, reclaiming your power, and building a life where peace, respect, and fulfillment are not optional but central to your existence.